And now let's look at the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center was owned by the New York Port Authority, and that was utterly controlled by ultra-Zionists. At the time of 9/11, a guy called Louis Eisenberg, a friend of Benjamin Netanyahu. He then agreed, for the first time in the history of the Twin Towers, to sell it into private hands, sell the lease into private hands. And he sold it to an ultra-Zionist friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, so much a friend, they used to talk every Sunday on the phone, Larry Silverstein. And his partner in this project, a guy called Frank Lowy of Westfield Malls fame, another friend of Netanyahu. And the person that provided the pressure to sell it into private hands was a guy called Ronald Lauder, ultra-Zionist, major at global level, from the Estee Lauder family, who was heading two privatization organizations in New York that recommended the privatization of the Twin Towers. Larry Silverstein bought the lease, and in his own personal contribution was $14 million. As a result of 9/11, he was paid out in insurance $4.5 billion. Soon as they got the lease, they dramatically increased the insurance in the case of a terrorist attack. The person who insured them initially was a man called Morris Greenberg of the insurance giant AIG, who was a friend of Kissinger, a friend of Netanyahu, all these people, usual story. But what Morris Greenberg did immediately, he had secured the insurance and the terrorist insurance for Silverstein, is he sold it on, reinsured it to 24 insurance companies and before 9/11, and they took the hit, not Greenberg. And what you had with the investigation or lack of it was a desperate desire not to get this into court, because then the evidence could be put before people in a public arena. So what they did was came up with a process of compensation for the victims of 9/11. And you would get a payout if you agreed not to take out civil action, basically. That was overseen by an ultra-Zionist called Kenneth Feinberg, a lawyer, who was also the man who oversaw executive compensation payouts, who got them and who didn't, after the financial crash of 2008. So he oversaw the families getting the compensation who didn't agree, who agreed rather, not to go into a civil action. But just under 100 families said, no, we're not taking your compensation. We want to know what's happened.
I think I saw a piece on 60 Minutes with him.
Yeah, so then, yeah, and that civil litigation of the 9/11 families was overseen by an ultra-Zionist judge called Alvin Hellerstein and ultra-Zionist a team in his team. And he was described as running a war of attrition against the families to make sure that none of them got to court. And I quoted from the New York Times article in the book where they're saying Hellerstein's just made another decision in the case, which has basically meant that the last standing family in 2011, I think it was, has now said, we're going to have to pull out because we can't win now he's done this. The case between the insurance companies who took the hit and Larry Silverstein about how much Silverstein got was overseen, judged by an ultra-Zionist judge called Mukasey, who later became Attorney General. And Silverstein's claim against airlines that got him a payout of millions was overseen by Alvin Hellerstein, ultra-Zionist judge.
All right, so it's a big ultra-Zionist web here.
Absolutely. But when I say ultra-Zionist, I'm talking about not Jewish people, not saying it's a Jewish plot. Vast majority of Jewish people, the overwhelming majority, have no idea what's being done, but they are being used as the smokescreen. Because what happens, as we talked about briefly in our last chat, we have, which is run at its core by the Sabbatean Frankist cult, what I call the anti-Semitism industry and the protection racket. And how it works is that anyone who gets close to uncovering any of this and much milder stuff and talking about it is immediately dubbed an anti-Semite, a Nazi, and all the rest of it. And that's the protection racket. And it's run ultimately at its core by this Sabbatean Frankist cult, which hates Jewish people. And this is why, as I mentioned in the last interview, if you're a Jewish person and you are criticizing Israel, this anti-Semitism protection racket will abuse you even more fiercely than non-Jewish people. Because it's not about protecting Jewish people at all. It's about protecting this cult. That's what it's about. And because of compartmentalization, many people in this ultra-Zionist protection racket will have no idea that what they're protecting is actually a cult.